busy 6 months.
Okay, we've got the live streaming going. We're going to go ahead and initiate record here in a second.
Yeah. Been a while.
All right, recording has been initiated. You are live streaming and recording.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the West Linn City Council for this Thursday, October 1st, 2020. We're meeting again virtually because of the global pandemic. I want to thank staff for all their efforts to allow us to hold our meetings virtually. The meeting today was called by two councilors to consider releasing some exempt records, and we also had a request from a councilor to adjust our meeting schedule to accommodate their own personal schedules and make things link up. So with that, the first order of business is the approval of the agenda.
So I move to approve the agenda as written.
Can I get a second? Councilor Cummings, I see a flag up.
Yeah, point of order. Just wondering if the agenda as written also includes release of a legal memorandum.
It just says releasing exempt city records.
So it doesn't matter if we list them separately and make them separate topics. Is that necessary?
It's not necessary to list them separately. As long as you have the category, you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Councilor Cummings?
Yes.
Council President Sackler?
Yes.
Councilor Relier?
Yes.
Councilor Walters?
Yes.
Mayor Axelrod?
Yes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity to provide comments on anything of interest to the city or any of the topics. I'm assuming in this special meeting, I don't know what these public comments are about, but why don't we just take them all so we can get them done? And my understanding is we have at least one live, or do we have two live comments now?
We have one, Brenda Perry.
Okay, and then we have one record, public record, that a request to read into the record. So let's call forward the first public comment, and welcome. And all you need to do is state your name and city, and I think you know the rules. We try and be civil and keep it within 5 minutes. Welcome, Ms. Perry.
Thank you. First, I would like to say that really being an hour and a quarter late to this meeting is somewhat unacceptable. And I would have liked to have heard an apology to everybody that's attending for the delay. So having served on the council with both Terry Cummings and Rich Sackler for 2 years, I can testify as to how difficult that was. Councillor Cummings has served on the council for 3 separate terms and caused dissent and disruption each time. She frequently complained of being victimized and ignored. Councillor Cummings, you were never the victim. The only victims were the other councillors and city staff that had to endure your behavior. Then 4 years ago, she finally gained an ally in Rich Sackler. And 2 years ago, the majority she craved when Bill Relier joined her team. If indeed Councillor Waters did express herself inappropriately, then the only thing that surprises me is that she endured the aggravation for as long as she did. Terry Cummings has mastered the art of provocation and especially likes to practice it behind closed doors. I can well understand the pressure that Councillor Waters experienced, as I have frequently had to deal with harassment and bullying from them both. When I ran for City Council, one of the complaints that Councillor Cummings voiced to me was that the current members had too many special meetings and executive sessions. This, she said, avoided the need for the agenda to have a 10-day notice and limited transparency when meetings were held behind closed doors. She and her supporters also complained about meetings being held in the afternoon when many citizens were working and could not attend. So what do we have here today? A special meeting held in the afternoon to release an executive session tape that would, she hopes, help damage Jules Waters politically and benefit Rich Sacklick in his run for mayor. Does anyone really think that this isn't the motivation? Of course, if Councillor Sacklick wanted to show a little integrity, he could recuse himself from the vote. The supposed event occurred during an executive session, and according to executive session rules, information regarding the event cannot be released without the approval of the whole council. She and Rich Sacklick signed a complaint and pushed for an investigation. However, they then decided not to wait for the report. They first shared the information with the tidings and then sent details of the full complaint to their supporters. Releasing executive session information without the approval of the whole council warrants a censure from the council. Councillors Cummings and Sacklick have both violated that requirement. Shame on both of you. Now the majority of three, consisting of Terry Cummings, Rich Sacklick, and Bill Relier, are planning on voting to release the tape. However, they should be careful. If it is released, it must be in its entirety, and then people can judge how much provocation was applied. The council should also release any previous tapes where the matter was discussed and pressure applied. Councillor Waters is making every effort to run a positive campaign focused on the issues. Unfortunately, it appears that Councillors Cummings and Sacklick want to continue dragging the reputation of West Lynn through the mud. What could have been handled with an apology, they want to escalate to the fullest extent. Also, while the council is releasing executive session tapes, then I would request that one for the June 3rd, 2019 executive session also be released. The people in West Lynn deserve to hear the justification given that allowed Councillor Cummings to break council rules by refusing to release her notes, be supported by our legal counsel, costing the city $50,000 and counting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Are there any other public comments?
That is all.
Oh, I'm sorry, we've got one to read into the record. Are there any live public comments?
No. That is all.
All right, Councillor Sacklick is, I believe, going to read the public comment submitted by email and asked to be read into the record from Rebecca Adams.
Yep, so it's Rebecca Adams dated September 21st, 2020 at 2:02 p.m. Little preface, this is her words. Sorry, I just noticed some lines that were formatted incorrectly and a few typos. Here's a cleaned up version of the same letter I sent. Please read this version into record as it is in proper written English and the other is not quite proper. So she did make the request. Dear Council, from listening to Park Advisory Board meeting tapes over the last few years, I was disturbed to notice a group of city volunteers and staff were saying some extremely inappropriate and degrading things about other citizens on a regular basis. Despite being on tape, they seem to be without any awareness that a public meeting requires a different tone than an angry gripe session where one degrades people the group does not like. This rancor usually was used to justify the weird games that staff and that group of volunteers played to delay and distort the park's master plan process in such a manner as to commit the plan to a large recreation swim center. I believe the voters have declined to support a large swim center at least 3 times in the past due to concerns it would be a money pit as so many other municipal pools are. This group's ruthlessness and gamesmanship in excluding smaller community centers from the planning struck me as weirdly antisocial, but since I support the civic values of smaller community centers, I forced myself to listen to their tapes and thus knew I needed to work twice as hard to advocate for a fair and open planning process that served the general interests of our citizenry. If you were around, you will remember how the planning protocols were ignored, distorted, and delayed by the Parks Director and the majority of the Parks Board, and how the Council and Planning Commission's role was minimized. I complained directly about the Parks Board's inappropriate denigration of others, and to my knowledge, City Manager Stein did absolutely nothing about it, even though by then many citizens had heard the tapes. Something similar, and possibly even worse, has come up recently and city council can do something about it. It seems a counselor who appears to be in tight with that same group that was so mean on the Parks Board tapes has herself brought a similar unprofessional and abusive tone to your meetings. At least that is what a workplace harassment complaint filed months ago describes. I'm not sure what the problem is to take months to handle a complaint and wonder if staff is up to their old delay tactics to protect their friends, but I do think council should just release the tapes relevant to the complaint. Public has a right to see for themselves whether Jules Walters really did swear profusely using the F word and hurl abusive insults at other council persons during executive sessions, and it is well within council's rights to release those sessions. The public has a right to know whether Mayor Axelrod ignored, condoned, or seconded any abusive language or actions since it was his job to enforce council rules. Swearing really has no place in civil discourse. Staff's apparent delay in addressing this complaint is reminiscent of the many delays and obfuscations that led to the perpetuation of an abusive and racist culture in our police department. Those delays had not worked out well, and an effort to delay or obfuscate now with regard to Council Walters' behavior will also not work out well for citizens who have a right to know. She is, after all, presenting herself right now as someone fit to be our mayor. I wish the complaint had been investigated promptly last June, long before Walters had declared her interest in being mayor. But now West Linn voters are poised to decide their next mayor and deserve to hear whether the abusive tone, use of profanity, and ageist insults were accurately described in a recent workplace harassment suit. I hope one day West Linn can rise above the crudity and self-protection of its long-standing crony network and embrace a culture of professionalism. Giving voters fair information promptly during the election process is important in allowing the best opportunity for a new culture of professionalism and transparency to flourish. Thank you for considering this request. Rebecca Adams.
Thank you. I would like to apologize for anyone for the delay in our meeting tonight. We had technical issues in resetting the second meeting. In our prior executive session did go longer than planned. During the scheduling, I had suggested we separate them, and it did not occur. Others were hopeful that I think the meetings would move along quicker than they did, and they did not. So that is why we're meeting a little bit late, and I apologize to anyone for any inconvenience that may have presented to them. Let's see, I see two hands up before we get to the next agenda item. I didn't see which one went up first. Councilor Sacklick, is that from reading or? You're muted.
Cummings was up first.
Okay, Councilor Cummings.
Yes, I'd just like to thank former council member Perry for her testimony. I'd also like to remind her that of the time she came to me almost 6 years ago, asking me to help her run her campaign and be her campaign manager. And at that time, she was looking to try to unseat two well-established sitting councilors who were running for their seats. We paired up with Russ Axelrod, and we worked very hard on your campaign. I put all my support behind you, introduced you. You were very unfamiliar with the city, and I showed you the ropes. And I'll never forget that after you won your seat on the council, you sent me a postcard. I still have it, a little card, thanking me for the help I gave you and saying, I hope I don't disappoint you. Miss Perry, you've disappointed me. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Councilor Sacklick.
Just a clarification of some of the statements Ms. Perry made. I believe the first one, if I heard it correctly, and I apologize if I'm inaccurate, but I think it was stated that the whole council would need to agree to release executive sessions. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ramus, it's only a majority of council that is necessary. Is that correct, Mr. Ramus?
That's correct. The council decision is made by a majority.
Okay, I just wanted to collect that record. I would have assumed that Ms. Perry would know that, being a counselor for a number of years, but the other inaccurate comment was with regard to my sharing my complaint. I had a legal right per Ms. Rubinoff to share the workplace harassment complaint with whoever I chose to. And it wasn't to my supporters. I'd like to, clarify that. I can give you a list, but one of them was Rachel Tillman, one of them was Glenda Golter, another one was John Collins. They're all not my supporters. They're just people that I respect in our community that I thought would need to know the truth of the complaint that I wanted to share with. So it wasn't my supporters. That was a political statement in my mind. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to, I believe there's no other further public comment. Is that correct, Ms. Smolowski?
That is correct.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 4 of our agenda, considering release of exempt city records. And I believe Mr. Ramus, or a combination of Mr. Ramus and Dee Rubinoff. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to at the beginning introduce everyone, since it's a virtual meeting. So let me take a moment and we can just record, document that. I apologize, I normally do that. So we are meeting virtually, so let's just kind of do a roll call on those present, an essential part of the meeting here. So myself, Russ Axelrod as mayor. On council, we've got Council President Richard Sakalik,
I'm present.
Councilor Jules Walters.
Present.
Thank you, Councilor Terry Cummings.
Present.
Councilor Bill Aurelier.
Present.
Thank you. City Manager Jerry Gabrielatos.
Present.
Our City Attorney Tim Ramus.
Present.
And our outside labor attorney Dee Rubinoff. Well, thank you. So Tim and Dee, I'm going to turn it over to you just to provide general context of the complaint that was filed and the process that the city and council went through, and kind of where we are today in this consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask Dee Rubinoff to introduce the item.
Okay, hi. So as the mayor said, our office provides labor and employment advice to the city. A complaint was submitted in June 2020 that came under the city ordinance 1704, which was enacted at the end of 2019 to comply with new legislation in Oregon, Senate Bill 479, which made the workplace discrimination laws applicable to elected public officials. The complaint alleged workplace harassment as defined in that legislation involving certain council members. I was asked to assist in obtaining an outside investigator to make sure that the investigation was legally compliant and to advise the council as needed as that investigation progressed. That investigation was conducted by a qualified EEO attorney, Michael Tom. We received the completed investigation report this week, and it was promptly made available to the council for review. In the meantime, the city had also received public records requests from the media and from some members of the public to release the recording of an executive session meeting last June 9th of this year, which was referenced in the complaint as being when some of the conduct had occurred.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ramus, anything to add to that, or?
No, only to add that the context today is consideration of what documents, if any, the council would choose to release to the public.
Yes. Councilor Sackler.
Have it up, but I'll go ahead and start.
Well, your flag's up.
I know I forgot to take it down. Apologies.
Oh, okay. Well, you want us to start another way?
If there was somebody else that had it up, then I defer to them, but okay, go ahead, Bill.
What's Aurelia's there?
Yeah, in order to cut to the chase here so we can get to the discussion, I'm going to move that council release the recording, the audio video recording, as well as the investigators' findings regarding the inappropriate activity and the harassment that Ms. Rubinoff just mentioned.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to release what I believe I understood was the executive session tape or a portion of executive session tape. I don't think a date was given, but I believe that was in reference to June 9. And for the final investigation report. I believe that's correct, the independent investigation report. That essentially, is that correct, stating the motion, Councilor Aurelian?
Yes, that is correct, sir.
Thank you. Discussion. Councilor Walters.
I would move to amend the motion to include the two executive sessions that led up to the June 9th executive session to be released to the public in audio form.
Which now?
The two executive sessions prior to the June 9th meeting, which we're discussing now, for context.
Well, I'll mention from my perspective, having listened to those tapes ahead of time or gone back, I don't know if other council members have either. I would ask that councilors all consider to withdraw the motions and to, at this time, just release the investigation report, which has all the details and describes the discussions from the individuals, evaluates the context of the discussion relative to the law, and makes a final determination and findings and conclusions. And I think the investigation report in and of itself is quite conclusive and quite descriptive, quite complete, and provides full context. Well, not full context, but it certainly is an element of the record that is reasonable to release for characterization of the incident or situation. So I'm not seeing anyone wanting to second that. Guess that would die. Then we're back to the request to amend. I guess, I'd like to second it for the recognition of context, but having not listened to it or to identify which section of the tape specifically we're referring to, and that seems really difficult for council to consider. And this did not come up earlier. So I guess council, in that light, I don't know how others feel about that, but what if we could move forward and, like I said, just release the final report now, which I think, again, is complete and describes the incidents and describes the matter as compared to the statute and the law around harassment, and has its own clear findings and conclusions. Which the tapes do not.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think the motion died for lack of seconds, so I don't think we need further discussion about that. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Councilor Relier, do you have a comment there?
Yeah, I do. So my comments here are, as a council, I think we have an obligation to establish, maintain, and build trust with the community. In this instance, the bar is high because the public will be weighing in on who they want to represent them as mayor for the next 4 years. With that said, the public is also subject to a lot of fake news and misinformation, as well as from those who file false accusations and try to use the legal process to benefit their own special interests, along with their bullying attitude that in turn costs the city dollars and waste our resources and are a waste not only of their time, but also our time. Their efforts don't go unnoticed and are not appreciated. In this instance, those impacted by the behavior have stated that they're willing to accept release of the investigative report and the recordings from the executive session as a remedy. Too often, victims are not allowed to help craft the remedy. However, here, the two counselors have agreed and stipulated that this remedy will suffice. And I believe the reason that they chose that was also because there's also a state law which stipulates that there's a 90-day check-in as far as a behavior check to make sure that the attitude adjustment has taken place, and so that council as a whole can determine whether or not further action needs to take place. So I believe we owe them, as well as the public, the opportunity to hear what was said, to see what was said and what the findings were from the investigator, and decide for themselves who they want to be their representatives going forward.
Councilor Cummings.
I would like to, before we go any further, just correct a statement or a perception that what has been thrown out there about the criticism about how long this investigation took. I want to express my appreciation for how carefully it was done, and also acknowledge that this is a totally new process for all of us. And it was probably made more difficult by one of the dates was inaccurate, and that there wasn't specific time stamps and so forth for some of the allegations. So it took a little more time to find them, or find whether there could find recordings to verify certain things. And so that took a certain amount of time. It was very hard for me to wait that long. I didn't know I had the right to disclose it, but the law does say that we aren't bound by a code of silence, that actually can have a damaging effect on the people that are affected, that want to have the problem stopped. So I appreciate that we're now finally at this process. It's been well over 3 months. And the goal in the very beginning, was simply to be able to talk to each other. Last fall, when we had a very contentious executive session about potentially terminating the city manager's contract, some very uncivil things were said, and I asked for a mediated session, and only 3 of the counselors were willing to do that. I kept asking. One of the reasons given was that it would be too expensive, so I kept asking and I looked into it and I found out that West Linn is still paying a contract with Clackamas County for their dispute resolution services. I've seen them in action. They're well-trained and it shouldn't cost very much. So I proposed that January 6th, right after we had the contentious vote to terminate Ms. Stein's contract. So if people want to see that, they can go view that right there. They can see the effort that was made to bring us together in a mediated session, which doesn't have to be public as long as we don't discuss city matters, to try to work on improving our relationships and set some ground rules about how we behave, both on the dais and in some of our more private meetings. I also, at that meeting, 3 counselors gave direction to set up a mediation. It didn't happen. Then I asked again at the January 23rd meeting. That was at the Robinwood station. And again, there was a lot of resistance from 2 counselors, including Counselor Walters and of course, Mayor Axelrod. But direction was again given for a mediation. It was never carried out by the interim city manager. So fast forward, there's never been any opportunity to have a face-to-face facilitated discussion that would help keep the tempers down so that we could talk about how we work together and how we treat one another and how it needs to be respectful. So when the next thing that happened was March 3rd, when I was chairing the meeting and Counselor Walters started interrupting me in the middle of what I was speaking, and I had to ask her to stop. She kept going on. I had to use the gavel several times. Then when I quit using the gavel, I turned to her and she said, "Don't stop looking at me like that." That's when I called a recess. And then in the back room, she swore at me after I asked her if she can be calm, because she didn't look like she was very calm. Come forward to June 9th, and the behavior was completely out of control. Whatever it is that is causing that behavior to be so extreme that civility isn't even a thought, whatever that is, I'd like to understand. But I'd also like to set some ground rules that when we're feeling out of control and so forth, we don't treat each other that way. So I did not take this step lightly. The day after it happened, instead of getting apologies, and this has been the case every single time, instead of getting an apology or some kind of acknowledgement about losing our temper, we get admonished. We get admonished as if it's our fault, as if it's our responsibility. This is not an apology. There's never been an apology. I have never heard an apology, and if I ever had, we wouldn't be sitting here today, because I'm willing to take any kind of an apology, even if it's just an acknowledgement about losing the temper. We can start a conversation. That has not been possible. So I'm hoping now that we took this step and we're making ourselves and the public uncomfortable with this, I'm hoping now we can move forward. Thank you.
Councilor Steinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't add very much to what Councilor Relier and Councilor Cummings both said very eloquently, and that was very accurate. I just want to share that I find it so amazing in our wonderful city. We have people that are willing to stretch the truth, are willing to embellish falsities for whatever political reasons, that people can't just live by honesty and truthfulness and work together with civility. It's really important that we do that. And the national narrative is it's terrible. Why can't we have that in our city? Why can't we do that better? So I believe that releasing the investigative report, which was done very well, and unfortunately, it took long enough that it comes into the election season. So it creates another potential narrative for people who want to take advantage of that narrative. But I assure you, I would have been happy for this to be done in July, a month after we made the complaint. I had no idea, no determination whether I was going to even run for council or as mayor, or as a counselor. Having just finished camp, I was undecisive whether I wanted to be involved in city politics. So for the people to take the narrative because it's political season and take advantage of that when it's clearly proven the complaint was made June 15th. That's almost 4 months ago. So it has nothing to do with the election. It just turns out that the luck of the draw, the way things have come out, has worked out that way. But accordingly, our public, that's been demanding transparency since the whole Micro Fester incident, and for most people running for council and mayor are advocating for transparency. Here's a perfect opportunity again for us to put transparency in front of the public so that they can clearly understand and make decisions on their own and see the truth and not be subject to reading inaccuracies in the media, hearing it in testimony, as Ms. Perry just did. That a lot of that testimony was inaccurate, in my opinion. And so I would just like to get back to some civility, honesty, represent what you believe in, discuss it, make a decision, and move on. There's no reason to hold grudges in this. We're here to conduct business for the city. That's our sole job. And that's all I wanted to do 4 years ago. And that's all I want to do moving forward. So hopefully we can put this finally to bed and we can move forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Walters?
Yeah, I don't really have a statement prepared because I thought this was just to vote on what was decided in executive session, but I just feel like I got barraged a little bit there. So I would just say that last June I fought vocally to represent some of West Lynn's marginalized voices that were being ignored in our executive session. And after a 3-month investigation involving 2 attorneys and an investigator, it has been determined that I made a remark in this context that was considered ageist according to the state statute and the city's conduct policies. I also used foul language, which I apologize to city staff, Councilor Relier, and Mayor Axelrod. That language has no place in public or private meetings. And now that I'm no longer bound to confidentiality, I would like to contextualize aspects of this complaint and why I was frustrated. The June 9th executive session, a closed door meeting, was the third in a series of conversations we had about appointing citizens to the city manager hiring panel. Councilors Sacklick, Cummings, and Relier approved a list of 31 names for this committee, including a citizen with documented history of making homophobic and transphobic remarks, actually dehumanizing hate speech, in my opinion. I expressed several times over the course of these 3 executive sessions that I felt it was improper and immoral to appoint someone with these hateful beliefs to this committee, particularly because a primary motivation for hiring a new city manager was addressing West Lynn's history of discrimination and cronyism. I was extremely frustrated by Councilor Sacklick's insistence on supporting the appointment of a person who has referred to the LGBTQ+ community as less than dogs, and openly mocked the Black Lives Matter movement in a letter that Councilor Sacklick read into the record during our Pride Proclamation meeting. This callous disregard for our LGBTQ+ citizens, for our citizens of color, and for my gay and transgender children is what prompted me to react so strongly. My biggest regret is that my actions have deflected from a very serious conversation about racism and homophobia on the city council. It was not my intent to be ageist in my remarks to the counselor, but I understand that legally they were, and for that I sincerely apologize to Councilor Sackler. I do feel West Linn residents deserve a city council and a mayor who will represent and fight for each and every one of them, regardless of their protected class. If I need to soften my language to get my point across, I will do that, but I will not stop advocating for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sackler, is your flag back up?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. If somebody else wanted to speak before I spoke again, that'd be fine with me. So I'll go ahead and address a couple of, this is so difficult. The narrative continues to deflect. Council Walters, we tried to find out from you when you're talking about this person who has a documented history of homophobia, you never provided anything ever to document those feelings or that background. And we had asked a number of times and it was never documented. So I don't know personally, I can guess what you may be talking about. You never put it into the public record as part of your commentary. And so that was one of the things that we tried to get to understand where you were coming from, that you got so angry about that. Nothing was ever provided to the council that would show proof of that. And so, you know, to make the statement that it's a proven, I don't understand where that is. I haven't seen anything in the public record. I haven't seen anything in newspapers, you know, other than the comments that you've made, and you've made the accusations. And so I don't understand why you're saying that without having some proof. When we make statements as counselors, we need to be responsible and show some proof and background for those comments, and to have a discussion around those comments, which was what was attempted by Councilor Cummings and I and Councilor Relier on numerous times, but you didn't seem to want to have those discussions. So I would still like to understand your perspective. So please provide us with something that we can look at, and provide the public something that they can look at to assess the validity of your words that you just said. It seems to be a political narrative. And so I'm uncomfortable with that. We shouldn't be doing that without proof. Also that the issue, and somebody else once made a comment about that on social media. I believe it was Kirsten Wyatt. I'll use the name. I think it was Kirsten Wyatt. No, it was Chris Kaczorowski, that I had the audacity to read into the public comment, a comment from somebody who was seen supposedly without any specific proof. I was just reading their comments into the public record because they have a First Amendment right to share that. I wasn't doing it because I agreed with it. I was doing it because I was acting as council president and bringing forth something that a citizen would like. Doesn't matter to me what the citizen writes. I just want to bring it forward if they want it read into the record, whether I agree with it or not. That's not my perspective. It's not my job as a counselor. So I really resent those accusations from people. They have no basis in my mind. And so again, please feel free to bring forward where you said that this person exhibited homophobia and those other comments. I'd like to understand that better and have a conversation, because, you know, I'm the furthest person from agreeing with people that are against any minority, whether it be LGBTQ, Black, Jews, whatever it is. I'm the furthest from that. And so the narrative to lead towards that is totally inaccurate, and it's appalling in my mind. I don't accuse anybody of that. If I have something to say, I show proof and discuss it. And that's the way we should be acting as counselors and mayors. Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to get into sort of a tit for tat on all these issues, but let's get, people could be kind of focused in their comments. And I believe Councilor Walters should have a response on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll be brief. It was a June 2019 email that it was an email exchange between Councilor Cummings and a citizen. And she obviously I was concerned about that person having made remarks in the chamber about their dissatisfaction with our Pride Proclamation in 2019. She shared that email with me electronically, and then I guess she was so concerned that she printed it out and brought it to me in the chamber. So it was common knowledge that this happened, and we talked about it in those prior sessions. So that's why I'm really struggling to make sure that we're providing the correct context. Those emails are all in your inbox, Councilor President. If you remember, Shane, when this issue first came up, Mr. Remus had Shane send all of the emails from that citizen to all of our email boxes. And now there are many, many, many emails, but if you want to go back to June 2019, you can read for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rallier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to add to the conversation the fact that there was plenty of opportunity for discussion on this matter. In fact, there was so much discussion on this matter and so much disagreement that it was put forth to the council members that we should write position papers to our legal advisor and support our positions, whether to allow or disallow certain members of the public to participate in the city manager selection process. And my position paper was founded upon constitutional rights and First Amendment privileges associated with those who have different opinions other than mine, or perhaps the next person, the same right, afforded the same right to participate in our public processes as the next person. So to say that one group should be listened to and the other group should not is certainly prejudicial, it shows bias, and it is not in my playbook. So my position was founded on the fact that people have a right to participate, and we cannot exclude people from participating strictly because their point of view may be different than ours. We're supposed to represent the interest of everybody. So our duty and our obligation is completely different than that of somebody that's a class of the public. We have to represent everybody, whereas that public is entitled to their particular position on a subject. And so to exclude them from this process would have invited liability and the potential for lawsuits, in my opinion, because we would have had violated their rights. And that was my position on this matter. And so for it to now all of a sudden become somebody that was defaming the LGBTQ plus community, where I was never copied on that particular email, knew nothing about it, even though it was asked on several occasions for the proof to be presented to council. I just, I'm amazed that we're even having that conversation, since it never occurred in any of our executive sessions. No proof was ever submitted to council, and it's not part of the public record.
In this context, I would like Councilor Walters to be able to kind of respond, since this directly involves his comments.
Yeah, I would just say that public accommodation is a basic tenet of our democracy, and it's extremely important to me. However, there's a distinction between allowing people to give their public comment and affording them the privilege to serve on a commission or a panel or a board. I think something especially as important as hiring a new city manager, I don't think it's appropriate to give somebody privilege to serve on that if they have had those discriminatory views. I talked to Mr. Remus about that a lot, and he agreed with me that we did not have to give him the privilege to do that. And that's why I was so frustrated, because I felt like we don't have to do this, but it's still being done. And I felt like it was a slap in the face, not just to me, but to all people who identify on the LGBTQ spectrum.
Thank you for that clarification. I'd like to focus these points if we could. So because that involved Councilor Reddy, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, when these issues come before council, it's our obligation to utilize the least restrictive process that still affords the person the opportunity to participate. In this instance, we used a screening process to look at the questions that were being asked of the candidates to ensure they were appropriate. Again, excluding somebody would have created a risk, would have used potentially legal resources to represent us in a lawsuit, and strictly going through a screening process that we utilized during the selection process allowed us that opportunity to ensure that these actions that Councilor Walters is mentioning she wanted to protect against were not afforded the opportunity to enter into the process.
Councilor Walters, something more on that? Your hand. Councilor Sackler or Cummings, briefly, you both talked for a while there.
Cummings is next, Mayor, and it would be nice if you followed the letter of the hands. And
Well, sometimes the hands and the sequence is difficult to follow, multiple things going on. So Councilor Cummings.
I'd like to clarify what I thought I heard. Councilor Walters, I thought I heard you say something about racism and homophobia on the city council. Those were the words I wrote down while you were speaking them. Does that mean you think we are racist and homophobic?
Let me clarify, yeah.
When we promote a homophobic person to a place of privilege, that's a discriminatory stance for the council. And yes, I did feel like it was really uncomfortable to read into the record an All Lives Matter proclamation just, 2 weeks after George Floyd died. I just felt like it was very, very uncomfortable. I was very concerned about it.
Okay, may I continue to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's part of our normal public forum process to allow community comments from anybody, from any race, creed, religion, or set of opinions. When we read those into the record, it does not mean that it is our opinion. And that's not a fair thing to say. Councilor Sackler is a council president. It's normally his role to do that. He didn't do that because he agrees with it. And I would think somebody in your position would know that. So I hope that's clear now. Okay. Secondly, I also feel duty bound to, just like Councilor Relier was saying, we really have to support people's freedom of speech. It's one of the foundations of our public forum to allow people with different points of view, different beliefs, to voice their opinion in a respectful manner, in a safe environment, and to not be afraid or feel shunned or cut out just because the people that are running the meeting don't agree with them. We will come together as a better people by listening to each other and listening to opinions that we've never thought of and wouldn't agree with and probably never will. And I do not agree with that gentleman's opinion about that particular topic. And as you know, I wrote back to him my reasons why. It was a respectful exchange, and I didn't see anything there that I thought would in any way constitute hate speech. It was a religious belief. And we also have constitutional protections against not discriminating or promoting religious beliefs. I think our country is better for that. So I will always support that. Even though I don't agree with the person, I will support their right. This is key to our democracy.
Thank you. If I might, just for the record, I think we all support that. I think it was clarified that this was not about someone expressing themselves, having a right to submit comments, but it involved the matter of being appointed by the council to another position. So we'll leave it at that for now, but that's what was the concern there, not people being able to communicate to the city. Councilor Sackler.
Yes. Councilor Cummings, did you just, I saw you waving your hand. Did you need to finish something?
Yes, Mayor, but the council was starting to go down the path of talking about cutting this person off electronically and not letting this person actually participate in the public forum like normal other people do. And I thought that was a dangerous path to go down.
Yes,
And like Councillor Sacklick said, I wouldn't even think about doing it without seeing proof, and having a proper process for that. Yes, if we have somebody who is threatening and using hate speech and making people feel unsafe, we need to have a process for that. You just don't do it though, because people don't like what somebody said. We can't go there. I won't go there.
well, as you know, I was the person who raised that after concerns of what I would consider harassment against our volunteers on some of our boards and repeated behavior in that conduct. And it was not to eliminate their first right speech to express their comments. They can always do that by mail. My question and my inquiry was, it was a privilege to actually use the city's email system to connect with our volunteers and boards and other email lists that the city manages. That was my inquiry, because I think it is inappropriate. So we're not trying to cut off someone from expressing themselves, but the privilege of using our email systems and our mailing lists for our volunteers and the like was many of our volunteers, including staff, were feeling harassed. And so it was an attempt to eliminate this, because we had asked this person very nicely to refrain from their conduct, and they refused to do so. There was, I think, maybe 1 or 2 times a soft apology came in and turned around, and the next day it was back to what I would consider disrespectful conduct, violating our council rules in terms of civic conduct. So that's what that was with respect to. So I do not want to pose it as we were trying to stop someone from expressing themselves and having different beliefs. That is not what is on the table here. And I'd like to wrap this discussion, if we could, soon. Councilor Sackler.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And so, Councilor Walters, with my heartfelt discussion, the email that you reference is June 2019. We weren't talking about, admitting this person to the process till a year later. And so if you had those concerns, why hadn't you brought it up prior to that for a discussion, or even to contact me individually and say, did you know this? And what's your view of that? I view this as being terrible. How do you view it? And so we never had that discussion. And that was one of the things that we tried to get to in some of our executive sessions. I don't believe that email says things, as Councilor Cummings did, that represent how you feel. But we all have different feelings, and we all evaluate the written word differently. And so to have a sensible civil discussion about it is what's warranted, but we never had that. And so I'm sorry that didn't happen. I would still relish to understand perspective on that. But that being said, that's water under the bridge. And also, one last comment, that person was turns out to be 40 or 42 people that gave input. And it was anonymous input. So the impact of whatever had nothing to do with the whole process. And it was, like I said, it was anonymous. And so the points that you were making aren't relevant to the process that we did. It was just to block this person out. So hopefully, I'd love to have that conversation with you to understand better your perspective, because obviously we disagree. But to do it the way it was done, was unprofessional, and hopefully we can move past that.
Councilor Walters?
Yeah, I would have really welcomed that discussion before you started telling me that you've made your decisions, so suck it up. And you told me suck it up more than once in the prior executive session. I don't feel like that's a heartfelt, extension from you of trying to understand when a member of a marginalized group is telling you, this is, through my lens, a problem. It's important to sit and listen. But I never got that. I never got that from you guys. I never did. In fact, you accused me of discriminating against his deep religious beliefs, or that person's deep religious beliefs. And I was offended by that. So I really think that, yeah, there was a point where we could have had a civil conversation about it, but that never occurred. And that I'm not going to take full responsibility for that.
Okay. Well, let's move on to this vote. We need to move the business along. I would like to say that I want to make it very clear for the record that I am completely in favor of offering to the community the final investigation report, the full investigation report, its analysis and findings. However, I'm very opposed to this council's approach to releasing executive session tapes in a context like this. I know it was very appropriate for us to release the tapes for the Fesser case, involving the entire city's position and understanding of the full council. But this matter involving conduct in this case is something I'd like to see, of course, worked out independently. This didn't occur in that way, but we did have a complete investigation. And I think the report speaks and provides the analysis and interpretation relevant to the complaint that is important for the public to understand. And I think releasing any of the tapes, particularly just the limited tape that's been suggested here first for June 9th, does not provide the context. And I hear there's a request for additional tapes, and I'm not willing to do that without having listened to them. So I'm going to have to vote no on this action, but I fully support, and I want to make it abundantly clear, I completely support the transparency, openness, and communication and sharing with the community about the incident and about its analysis and findings by an independent investigator. So that needs to be, I need that to be abundantly clear in the record. In the final comment, Councilor Walters, do you have something to say on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would add, for transparency's sake, I am perfectly willing to release the audio portion of that tape that we listened to earlier today. Thank you.
Okay, call the vote.
Point of order.
Councilor Cummings?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because I think we've had a little trouble with confusion over what the motion was.
Okay.
Take the motion.
Yes, so I'll try and repeat the motion as best I can. I believe the motion was to release the final investigation report and its findings, and to release a limited portion of the June 9th, 2020 executive session tape that was subject matter specifically referenced in the final report.
Thank you, and that would be the videotape.
Yes,
Yes.
I assume the video. We only saw audio, but my understanding.
I'm going to repeat the motion correctly, because we kind of messed that up with the pickleball situation. So just trying to make sure we're clear. Thank you.
Let's see, Councilor Walters, is there anything, I mean, I've asked for a vote here. I've got a couple flags up. Sackler, do you have a flag up?
Yes, I do. I wanted to amend the motion, if I could, to have it add to complete this activity of releasing the investigative report and the video/audio within 2 business days, and put it on the spotlight on our website front page, so the public can easily find it.
Second,
Okay, so now we've got a second amendment to release this information within 2 days.
2 business days.
Sorry,
2 business days.
2 business days.
That would be Monday, by Monday.
Okay. And have it available on the city's website.
On the spotlight that's on the homepage.
Okay. Councilor, now I guess we're going to have some discussion on the amendment. Councilor, the second amendment, Councilor Relier.
Yeah, I distinctly recall that the legal counselors mentioned to us that it was going to take time for them to go through the recording and pull out those sections associated with the investigative report. I think that before we move forward with any amendments to the motion, that we should ask council and staff how much time they think it's going to take to do that, so that we're not moving forward with something that's not enforceable or not going to happen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Can we make the motion as soon as staff is available to accurately separate and post the information on the website?
Well, I would let's let Ms. Rubinoff and Mr. Ramus, because we did listen to a section that I thought was the section. So I don't know if let them give us their input if they can do it.
I don't have the technical knowledge to know if we can take a section of the video and put it on the spotlight on the website.
No.
Someone on staff will have to make the determination whether that's possible. The section that the council listened to, I don't see any concerns in that section as far as any information in there that should be protected from disclosure.
Okay, so Councilor Relier, your point's well taken. So there may be to I don't know how we amend the amendment to make it as
you could withdraw your amendment and restate it. You want to withdraw the second and restate it?
I'll withdraw my amendment and I'll restate a new amendment to add that the investigative report and the video/audio be posted to the spotlight section on the homepage of the Westland website as soon as staff is able to do that within reasonable time.
All right, so we've got a movement. Is there a new amendment? Second amendment, is there a second?
So so we're amending the motion to include this action. So I think we need to read then, are we voting on the amended motion and then the initial motion?
We're voting on the second revised, or he withdrew the second amendment and restated his second amendment. So we're voting only on the amendment right now to have staff the investigation report and the videotape and what's the term? Sorry, video and
Audio
recording of the portion of the June 9th tape as soon as they can, do it. That's what we're voting on right now.
So I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to direct staff to post to the website as soon as it's possible, the investigative report and the segment of the June 9th executive session pertaining to the discussion.
The specifics were to put it on the spotlight, which is on the main homepage.
Okay, on the spotlight.
Most accessible, that's all.
Okay, further discussion. Councilor Walters. You're muted.
I would like to amend the motion to include the prior two executive sessions.
Point of order, Mayor, that already failed. Do we need to spend more time on that?
If there's not a second to, and it sounds like it's going to fail anyway, so it dies. It appears. I'm uncomfortable releasing executive. If we want to pull out context, if I haven't listened to them, I'm just not comfortable with it. By principle, not on just the principle matter.
Point of order, Mayor. Can we move on, please? We're calling the vote, aren't we?
We are. If there's no further discussion, we're voting on that second amendment. Call the roll, please.
Councilor Relyea?
Yes.
Councilor Walters?
Yes.
Councilor Cummings?
Yes.
Council President Sackler?
Yes.
Mayor Axelrod?
Yes. All right. That's the second amendment. I believe the First Amendment is the next vote. And the First Amendment, I don't have a scribe here for me, so maybe we could get that clarified as necessary. But the First Amendment was to, let's see, the tape's already.
It's to release
with the amendment.
Yeah, it was to release the investigative findings as well as the audio and video recordings from the June 9th executive session that are applicable to the harassment complaint.
Yes, that's what it was. So it was submitted to include the tapes. So we're now voting. Is everyone clear on that? To release the investigative report and the executive session tapes from the June 9th recording. Excerpt. Call the roll, please.
President Sackler?
Yep.
Relyea?
I can barely hear you. If that's for Relyea, yes.
Councilor Walters?
Yes.
Councilor Cummings?
Yes.
Mayor Axelrod?
No. Thank you. Ms. Rubinoff, I want to thank you for your work and all your efforts, and the independent investigator for their thorough work. Appreciate it. Hopefully we don't have to come back to you for this service again. And for, sorting through the statute and the new statute and the requirements there, I know took a bit of effort. So thank you for that from all of our council.
You're welcome. I'm signing off.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Rubinoff. Appreciate your assistance.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda, there was on the exempt city records, some kind of late request. Councilor Cummings. Councilor Cummings.
Would you like me to introduce this?
I guess so, if that's the preference of council.
Okay. Thank you. Over the last 2 years, Mr. Rory Bielostowski has made a number of claims in the media about the city's lack of effort to engage Mr. Bielostowski in settlement negotiations related to his public records request for my personal notes. such as stating that his request was ignored and both requests went unanswered. This was actually published twice in the tidings this week. Those claims are not factual. And we have a memo, a legal memorandum dated November 6, 2019, titled Bialystowski Negotiation, which contains a month-by-month account of the numerous attempts the city made to mediate with Mr. Bialystowski from February 26th until February 28th, when the State Court of Appeals attorney removed Mr. Bialystowski's appeal from the settlement conference program and returned it to the Court of Appeals active docket. And that's where it's been since, because Mr. Bialystowski has made several delays, not the city. When Rory Bialystowski and David Baker first made their request in early 2019 to see all my notebooks from all my years on council, dating back to 2005, in their original form, I confirmed that I would be willing to hand over my notebooks, but in order to do this, my notebooks would have to be legally reviewed and legally exact information would have to be legally redacted prior to releasing them. So it was basically an impossible demand, because I could not legally hand over my notebooks in their original form. I'd like to show you what we're talking about. I also didn't know what notebooks he was talking about. I write notes. It's how I see what I'm hearing. I wrote extensive notes the first time I met Mr. Bialystowski. He came to the library and I wrote about 1.5 pages of notes about him so that I could remember what he told me. These are my notes to myself. I don't share these notes with anybody else. And I have trouble reading them myself sometimes. My notebook can look like this. My notebooks can look like this, like this, like this, like this,
Right.
like this. It could be the notes that I take when we do the city budget. It can be the notes when we do the goal setting session. It can be the notes from 2005, when we had the budget hearing, where buried in all this was Alma Megamit's embezzlement, and we didn't know it, but I still have it. This is the kind of thing I'd be handing over, I guess, because it's not defined. I don't really know what I should be handing over. But I'm tired of being accused of not being able to hand them over. The request is not reasonable. So the city proceeded to notify Mr. Bialystowski and Mr. David Baker that they would need to modify the scope of their request and accept legal redactions. That's because a normal public records policy, according to the state attorney's public records manual, allows the jurisdictions to tell the requester that they need to narrow the scope of their request. Choose a topic, choose a date range, be specific. And if it's reasonable or not to expect somebody to produce records that date clear back to 2005, the jurisdiction has the right to determine that. The city attempted, Mr. Bialystowski and Mr. David Baker never submitted a modified public record request and never indicated that they would be willing to accept redactions. This is key. The city attempted to mediate with Mr. Bialystowski about 12 times in 2019, and each time he clearly rejected the legal process of redaction to protect legal information, even though this is an essential aspect of public records. Mr. Bialystowski clearly seemed to be more interested in the report. For example, March 19th, 2019, Bialystowski said he had concerns with the concept of mediation in public records dispute because he believed settling out of court would result in less judicial oversight of the results, meaning he wanted to go to court. He didn't want to try to settle or mediate. And he could have had my notebooks if he would have accepted redactions. April 22nd, 2019, Bialystowski stated, I'm seeking these records in the full form so that myself and others can inspect them, and further explained that he'd rather see it play out in court. Once the right for me and others to inspect the record as a whole is determined judicially. That was apparently the goal. May 16th, this is before the hearing at before Clackamas Circuit Court. May 16th, Bialystowski said he wanted to file a partial summary judgment so his right to inspect the notebooks will get a day in court. June 11th, Bialystowski said he felt a different stance would be taken on the issue publicly in court. He was hoping the judge would rule in his favor. Well, that didn't happen. July 23rd, Clackamas Circuit Court Judge Henry Breithaupt denied Bialystowski's appeal, stating that according to the law as it's written, Means was not a public body, therefore the matter is not public record. That was the answer. And that's all we have to rely on right now because none of us are judges. September 11th, 2019, Bialystowski filed an appeal of Circuit Court's decision to the State Court of Appeal. Bialystowski again refused to accept redactions and instead demanded that the city and Ms. Cummings acknowledge that her notes constitute public records under public records law. He was demanding that we say something that is outside of the law, outside of what Judge Breithaupt ruled. Just like handing over notes that haven't been redacted of their legally exempt material, that's an impossible demand. So the Clackamas, so the state has took it off of the settlement conference program and returned it to the Court of Appeals. You know, this has been in an incredible amount of public expense that's gone to simply the quest to prove that personal notes should be public records. I don't understand why this young man didn't just go straight to the legislature and say, look, I don't agree with the way this language is written and the way it's being interpreted. Please work on some clarification if he wishes for that, okay? Because even now, when he takes this to the state will most likely rule just as Mr. Breithaupt is, because they have to go by the letter of the law. So the truth is, the city and I did, in fact, respond to Mr. Bialystowski's records request. This is about a young man who decided to force our city, Clackamas Circuit Court, Clackamas District Attorney, Oregon Government Ethics Committee, and the State Court of Appeals to expend a considerable amount of taxpayer dollars on his litigation instead of going to the state legislature about whether it makes sense to change the wording of the law. Thank you. Therefore, I hereby move to release the November 6, 2019 legal memorandum titled Bialystowski Negotiations.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to release the November, what was the November 6th?
November 6, 2019.
November 6, 2019 memo from legal.
Yes, and it's nothing but a bunch of facts. We're not disclosing any legally sensitive information. It's just a calendar of the efforts to mediate with Mr. Bialystowski. It was produced almost a year ago. There's been more efforts since then, I'm sure.
Yeah.
This is as of last year.
All right.
People complain about how much our legal expenses are going up.
You got it. So discussion.
Just a quick correction, Mayor, just to add, it's the title of the memo is RE regarding Bialystowski negotiations, authored by Mr. Tim Ramus on November 6, 2019.
This is what it looks like. This is the document, the actual document.
Yeah, I get it. That's fine. Yeah, I know what his memos look like. Any discussion from members? So I just learned of this just prior to today's meeting, and I would like because it involves legal, and you say it's all factual, and I guess it might be. I would like at least the courtesy to look at it, and could we vote on this on Monday? So I get the opportunity to at least look at the memo, to remind myself what was there. I'm sure I read it at some point. It may all be factual, but why this has to just be done tonight? I would like the opportunity on principle to actually go back and read it, and then have this vote on Monday. So I would request that maybe council consider doing this at our regular meeting on Monday, giving all councilors, those of us who maybe haven't had a chance to look at it, to go back and look at it, which is just 2 business days. Councilor Sackley.
Oh, I just wanted to, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention, thank you, Ms. Cummings, for that thorough analysis and I guess, to put it bluntly, regurgitation of the facts over the last 2 years, I guess, 1.5 to 2 years. I think it's valuable for the public to hear that, and you will hear that kind of a transcript for people who would like to have a copy of it to really understand what's going on, so that people don't swayed by narrative and writings, whether they be in the tidings or the Oregonian, wherever they are. The truth is the truth. And so I don't see any reason to delay this or to even question Mr. Ramos's, memo from almost a year ago. We all read it then. I read it then, and I agreed with it then. So I don't think we need to spend more time on it Monday. I think we spent enough time. I think we just need to get to a vote, finish our discussion, and get to a vote.
Councilor Walters. You're muted.
So I tend to find it's more fair when we give everybody a chance to look at the material. So if the mayor is asking for just a brief extension of 2 business days, I would like for him to have that. So that's my opinion.
Really? Councilor Relier, are you there? There you go.
I am. Yeah, thank you. So the question would be for Mr. Ramos. Mr. Ramos, in your point of view, do you see anything that's going to create any issues that of liability associated with releasing this memorandum?
No, I don't see any liability issue in it. It's simply a description of our efforts to settle the case.
Thank you.
All right, roll please.
Walters?
As I said, I'd prefer to wait, so I'm going to vote no. No.
Counselor Cummings?
You're muted, Councilor Cummings.
I'm voting yes, and I'd like to remind people that this document is available a year ago, and that it was available over 24 hours ago.
Council President Sacklett?
Yes.
Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Axelrod?
No, and I just want to clarify that this is, I just think it's disrespectful. I've just gotten back from vacation. I hadn't seen it before. Just recently, it was sprung on me just before the meeting, and just the courtesy to look at it. 2 days, I don't think is unreasonable. I'm sorry you don't feel that way. So I'm gonna vote no. And in the future, I'd like a little more lead time, I think, to give our council members all courtesy about items you're going to bring up on a meeting. Should be, I think, respectfully offered a little ahead of time.
Mayor, it was available yesterday.
I'm sorry. The other item that we're here to discuss is item 5, City Council meeting time. And apparently, at the request of Councilor Relier's schedule, who can no longer meet in the afternoon times that we've, as you know, under this COVID, we sort of switched to this afternoon time frame of 2 o'clock. And beginning, I thought it was after October 5, but it's clarified that beginning next Monday, Councilor Relier won't be available until after 5. However, as I had mentioned at our last meeting, we have a special meeting on Monday scheduled for 2, and it was noticed that way for a special to hear an appeal on a planning matter on the Mid-Hill case, of which has been arranged. If we do not keep that date, our city loses its opportunity to hear the appeal. And my recommendation to council is that we proceed to adjust our schedules for meeting time to accommodate Councilor Relier after the 5th, but that we continue to hold the meeting on the 5th and the hearing that's been noticed so that the city has the opportunity to actually hear the appeal case. So that's kind of on our docket tonight to decide, I guess, are we going to move our meeting times to the standard back to 6 o'clock for a meeting, where I'm assuming on regular business meetings, the pre-work session would start at 5, I assume. That's about it. Councilor Sackler.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And so I guess the general question is about moving back to the 6 o'clock timeframe. I think we should definitely do that for a number of reasons. One, that Councilor Relier has requested it. He's unavailable because of a work commitment, a new work commitment. And even not to belittle that, Councilor Relier, but more importantly, the public has been sort of asking for this over the last 6 months. On social media, etc. There's been a lot of complaints not a lot of complaints, but some complaints and concerns that people that go off to jobs that aren't working from home don't necessarily have the time to do it during the day. So I think it would accomplish that as well in the efforts of transparency and being able to provide that to the public as well. And so I think it would be good to go back to the schedule, the regular schedule we had, albeit, it puts a little bit more burden on staff for evenings, but we did it for X amount of years, and hopefully we'll be done with COVID sometime in our lifetimes. And then secondly, a specific question for Councilor Relier. Do you have any strong feelings about being at the Monday meeting? If you don't, then, I'm okay with keeping it at 2 o'clock so that we can conduct our business.
Councilor Relier.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your consideration. I don't have any strong feelings regarding your ability and commitment to address the issue without my presence in the meeting. But there has been quite a bit of comment from the public about their ability to participate, because quite a few of the public that have regular work schedules are not able to participate. And so I think it's in our best interest to get back to our normal schedule and give them that opportunity to participate.
Mr. Ramos, I have one clarifying question. If Councilor Relier, upon reviewing the materials in the file and inability to make the meeting, can he still submit a notice of record to the council rendering an opinion one way or another on the case? Or is that, would that be considered?
Yeah, it is possible for him to participate, but in a slightly different form. He would need to review the record of the proceeding. The council would then need to continue the proceeding until a point where he could be there to participate. So he really can't review it and then submit it in writing. But if you had the hearing and then continued it.
Continue to a date certain.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I don't know where that takes us in terms of our time limitations and that sort of thing. You have to ask staff about that.
I would think we want to know that because otherwise we lose the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't think we could go beyond a certain date was my understanding, but I don't know. Mr. Gabrielatos, do you know?
I don't know if that would satisfy that 120-day requirement. I wonder if Ms. Molesky might know.
I'm looking for the email that the planning commission sent to me to see what the date was.
I believe it was October 8th, if I recall your email earlier.
Okay.
While she's digging, I noticed I got an email that one of the public commenters that intended to comment on earlier that couldn't get on is waiting on the call for their public comment.
Yeah, Elizabeth Mullins is here. Would you like me to ask her if she'd like?
Is she still there?
She is.
Okay. I don't know what she's commenting on, but I would guess let's ask council if we want to let, since she's been waiting, to at least take her public comment.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
a couple nodding. Okay. Maybe we could, Mr. Ramus, is it okay to have a little interlude while staff checks on the date?
Yes.
To take this public comment, just to keep things moving?
Yes, no problem with that.
Okay. So Kathy, can you bring in Ms. Smollins?
Elizabeth, I've unmuted you. Can you talk? Oh, she said she does not plan to talk.
Oh. All right, so scratch that.
Yeah, it looks like the expiration is October. I have to find Jennifer's because Darren had sent me an email and then Jennifer did too. So I have to find hers. Got a lot of emails.
Okay, so maybe the thing to do is to continue with our hearing at 2 o'clock. And then by then we'll have the answer and knowledge about whether or not Councilor Relier can participate, or if we have an opportunity to extend to a date certain for a full council vote. And then otherwise, Mr. Ramus, if maybe it'd be worth your clarifying to council in a brief email or something, or to Councilor Relier, his role and rights, if there's an opportunity for him to submit other comments in any way for the record for our hearing.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah.
So I'm looking at the email just for clarification. The 120 days expires on October 15th. According to your email, Kathy, at yesterday at 3:43.
Is that the one from Darren? Because Jennifer Arnold, who's doing it, I think she said it was the 8th, and that's why we had to make the 5th a special meeting.
Okay.
So I think
Right.
the 8th was 120 days, which should be Thursday.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think your suggestion is a good one. The real question is how much time would you have for a continued hearing for a flow to the full council? And we will get that information by Monday.
Okay. It sounds like it might have to be scheduled on the 6th or 7th.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we can look at their calendars. I have a commitment the evening of the 6th, but have some open time on the 6th and 7th. In the afternoons.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. I believe that's it for our agenda tonight.
Nope.
And there be no further business identified on our agenda. We are adjourned.
Nope. We have council reports. Mayor, I have something to bring up for us to discuss while we're together. Won't take very long.
Oh, I just had city council meeting time. I didn't know there was something else.
Yeah, well, it's under council report, so it wasn't on the agenda per se, but so I'd like us to how we move forward with potential public input to us via email or other electronic communications or mail with respect to potential harassment or what may be perceived as that. I think we confidential memo, but it would be good to have a work session. So I don't know what council's opinion is of moving forward with a work session to discuss that, or maybe need to be in an executive session. But I'd like to move forward sooner rather than later because it would be helpful.
I'm not sure exactly what the what you're asking for.
Mr. Amos, maybe you could frame it so that I don't say something.
Yes. Without going too deeply into the confidential memo I sent, we did recommend that the council conduct an executive session to consider the legal advice in that memo, which does relate to communications and communications issues. So our recommendation would be to conduct that initially in executive session so you could consider the legal issues you raised. But of course, if you wish to, you could certainly do it in a public work session.
Okay. So we'll work with Jerry and we'll get it something on the work session schedule.
Well, I wanted to ask council's opinion because Mr. Amos just said we could do it one of two ways, either executive session or in a public session. So I'd be curious what the rest of council thinks, and then based on the consensus, we could try to schedule something that makes sense.
And what was do you have a preference?
Yeah, I don't see the downside to doing it in the public. You know, it's something that we've been, it's something that I think would end up being in the public anyway. So if it's an either or, I would prefer to do it in a public work session.
Okay, and I guess I got to go back and see if there's another memo I need to look at that I did not see, but I will. Councilor Walters, or no, Cummings, I think was first.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be in favor of doing this in public. I think the public could benefit from this discussion. And as far as I know, there isn't any legally sensitive, it's not pertaining to any particular instance or individual that I can, unless the attorney would correct me.
No, I think we can do it in either forum.
Councilor Walters.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go through that memo in detail since it wasn't on our agenda today. So can we make that decision on Monday?
Fine with me.
Well, just for your reference, the memo's dated September 23rd. Attorney-client privilege from Mr. Ramos.
So let us look at that and confirm, and we'll come back and discuss it. We'll add it to our item as a business item of council on the 5th.
Councilor Relia, you have any thoughts you want to share?
I don't on that particular topic. I won't be in the meeting on Monday to help, firm where that's headed. So I apologize for that. I do have something else to discuss when we're finished with this topic, but I'll hold off on that comment until this topic finishes.
I would add that Councilor Relia, you could always submit your suggestion to Mr. Ramos ahead of the meeting, and he can bring that forward to council on the 5th if you like. Let's see, several flags up. Councilor Cummings, back to you. No. Councilor Walters. Councilor Relia, something more?
Yeah. So regarding our whole process for making motions and
Wait,
honoring.
I'm sorry. Is this a new issue? Let's just finish the other one. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to comment on this one again. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
It's okay. So on this issue of this raised about the September 23rd memo, everyone can take the time to read it and we'll discuss it on Monday, the plan moving forward. And Councilor Relier can submit his opinion and have a chance to relook at the memo and send his thoughts to Tim ahead of that meeting. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's not a critically urgent, but it's something that we need to address for sure.
Well, it's only 2 days from now.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay.
I just
Councilor Cummings?
It was my understanding that this was somewhat complex. We're not going to try to, we're just going to have an overview of it, or we're not going to, I mean, we have to prepare for the hearing with our work session, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know what this particular topic is addressing for that, so I don't know what it's going to take. The focus of Monday is the hearing.
Yeah.
Well, there's some other items on there too, of course, but. Okay, let's go back to Councilor Relier and wrap up an item he has there.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to try and bring on our discussion, perhaps in a work session some point in the future, the issue about honoring the motion on the floor, so that as we go into our discussions on topics, for instance, the pickleball court issue up on Skyline Ridge, we don't end up with a motion that is different, which hasn't gone through the process of amendment, so that we all know what we're voting on. Because a lot of times we ask for comment from a lot of different groups, and in the end, we seem to have consensus on what we're going towards, but we haven't necessarily honored the motion that's on the floor. So just a brief little work session, having that brought to our attention, having the process discussed, so we're all familiar with it and we can firm that up, I think is going to benefit us as a council.
Thank you. We will get it added. Councilor Cummings. You're muted.
On that note, I realize you've been gone, Mayor, so maybe you haven't read the email, and I don't know who else has, but I did make the suggestion that maybe it would be more efficient for us to have one of the staff members, like Ms. Molesky or Mr. Digby, to write down the motion when they hear it, clarify it if they didn't hear it very well. So when we start out, we have a clear motion. We go into our discussion, and then that staff person can read it out. So that if anybody thinks we've kind of drifted a different direction, we can make amendments. Okay?
Yes, I did read that, by the way. Thank you. I think it's a good idea. I will say also that trying to manage meetings on a tiny 7 by 8 foot screen virtually with 14 things going on, phones going off, emails flying around, sometimes it's kind of a challenge. I'll try to do my best. Sorry if I miss some details here and there. I try to get it correct, but we can always improve the process. I agree. So happy to work on that. Thank you for raising it. Okay, no further business. Then we are adjourned. We'll see you Monday at 2 o'clock.
All right.